Alex took a slow and even breath, being as silent as possible. He had taken his time to slowly climb to his position near the top of the Jimad tree. Its large leaves provided excellent cover and allowed him to take his time scouting his target. At that height, he was able to see most of the compound's interior. The splotches of dirt, along with the bits and pieces of local foliage on his uniform, helped to break up his silhouette. It also masked his smell to match what was around him. He watched and waited. He was as patient as a stone. Training and a long career perfected the skill. You didn't get to be his age by being sloppy. His was a very unforgiving job, and mistakes could easily be fatal. Alex served the Terran Alliance as an infiltration and elimination specialist, or an assassin to most people. His target was inside a well-guarded facility on an alien planet. Lush vegetation and the amount of animal life reminded him of the jungles on Earth. He watched and noted the guards' patrol route's response time to some false alarms he staged with the help of some local wildlife. He picked out the obstacles to avoid, the ones he had to deal with, and the ones that would provide good cover. He spent several hours observing before slowly descending the tree, doing his best to avoid excessively disturbing the local wildlife. It was another hour of painstaking work to crawl to the very edge of the open space between the first fence and the forest edge. He was in no hurry, waiting for nightfall to make his move. The open space was a distance of 25 meters, but if he timed it right, he could just make it past the fence and into the shadow at the base of the wall. He seemed to barely move as he checked his gear was ready. No metal to jingle, all straps tightly secured, a pair of ceramic knives, one in his boot and the other on his torso harness. His uniform, gloves, and hood were made of a material to hide his heat signature. There were various pockets to let him carry a few useful objects, but lined to muffle any noise the contents made. He took some water and added enough to the soil to make a little patch of mud. He then wiped all the exposed skin on his face and neck. Not only would this help mask his heat signature, but whatever did show through the mud would be small enough that it might make the guards think it was just a small animal. He checked his watch. 13:30 a.m. local time. An hour and a half to shift change. The sentries would be losing focus by now, falling into the dull routine of patrolling back and forth. They'll be starting to think about crawling into their bunks and falling asleep about now. The interval between their turnaround point was getting longer as the night progressed. It was time. He set his body in position to move as fast as possible without rising more than a few centimeters off the ground. He focused on the weak spot he found in the fence. He waited until both sentries moved far enough apart to make his move. It took less than 10 seconds, and another 10 to lift and slide under the loose part of the fence. The sentries had made their turns and were returning, so he found a shallow spot in the grass and stayed still. The guards didn't even notice him. They'd barely departed before he made it to the deep shadows at the base of the stone wall. He made very slow movements as he changed and removed the small covers on his fingertips to reveal a small patch of black fabric on each tip. He touched a spot on each of the gloves, and there was the slight feeling of power flowing through them. He checked on both sentries before putting his hands on the wall. The small patches on the fingertips functioned like magnets, except they could attach to anything. They would bond at a molecular level as long as they were activated. The gloves were attuned to his hand movements and could be turned on and off at the flex of his fingers. They let him crawl up the wall despite it being stone and perfectly smooth. Unlike climbing spikes, they left no marks on the wall. The wearer did have to be very strong to use them for climbing without using his feet, but Alex trained frequently to keep up the strength and dexterity needed for it. He reached the top of the wall, took a quick peek at the area, and dropped to the ground. He was almost moving before he hit the ground, taking cover behind some crates. Security in the compound was almost non-existent until hitting the buildings. Checking the shadows along the wall, he found what he was looking for. A nice deep shadow in an interior corner of a building. Without another glance, he took off in a sprint, leaping at the corner of the wall and using the momentum to climb the wall, alternating feet between the two walls until he reached a ledge and pulled himself up and over. He rolled into the shadow of a ventilation duct and caught his breath. He inspected the route he wanted to take when he climbed up the side of the watchtower. It extended up another 2 stories from the middle of the enemy HQ, where his target was located. He got a glimpse of the guard when it looked out the side facing him. It was a Devorian, known for their amazing eyesight, but not such good hearing. Probably why they had the central tower. Alex took the time to move some gear around before activating the gloves and starting his climb. He worked his way up in a zigzag pattern that allowed him to move around the corner of the building as needed to avoid lights. It was a slow climb, trying to avoid drawing the eyes of sentries by rapid movement. But he was starting to tire a little, and that slowed him down a little more. He finally got up to just below the tower's ledge. Hanging with one hand, he pulled out the syringe he'd prepared before climbing. It was filled with a fast-acting sedative designed to work on Devorians. He waited until he heard the sentry's footsteps near the opposite side of the tower. With a quick peek to locate the guard, he pulled himself up and over the lip as quietly as possible. He then quickly moved to grab the Devorian's snout and hold it shut while injecting it with the sedative. It took a matter of moments for the drug to begin to subdue the sentry. Alex gently lowered the guard down, bound its arms and legs to prevent movement, and secured the snout to prevent shouting. The sedative should last at least an hour, but better safe than sorry. He also disabled the sentry's weapon, just in case. He relocated his knives to forearm scabbards and removed his boots. The fabric of the foot coverings allowed for nearly soundless movement, but still provided a grip on slick surfaces. Crawling to the roof hatch, he opened it slightly and made sure the room was empty. Seeing no one, he lowered himself to the floor and reached up to flip the latch and lock the hatch. He made his way down the dimly lit halls, avoiding the guards by ducking into empty rooms or hiding in dark corners. He made his way to the second-floor command center. A quick search showed a maintenance hatch in the ceiling. He gently moved the lid aside and pulled himself up before replacing the hatch lid. Alex allowed his eyes to adjust to the darkness before examining his options. He gave a predatory grin when he heard voices coming from the command center. It let him pinpoint the exact location of his target. Inch by inch, making sure he was always on something that would hold his weight, he found another maintenance hatch that opened above a small recess with some of the cables that provided power to the computer systems. He cracked the lid and verified it was empty before gently lowering himself to the ground. A quick peek showed his target looking at the large view screen along the front wall. It was less than 3 meters to the target, but he also saw a pair of sentries near the exit door. He quietly drew a blade, double-checked the target, and slipped out of his hiding place on noiseless feet. The guards didn't even have time to react before he covered the distance. With one hand, he grabbed one of the Aldorian's horns and pulled his head back. The second brought the knife around to the target's throat. He flipped the knife so that the flat part of the blade touched the neck. "You're dead," he calmly spoke to the target and then added, "You owe me another bottle of scotch." His target began to swear and then composed himself. Malnix turned to face Alex. "Put it on my tab." Malnix looked over at his grinning bodyguards. "Don't you two even start laughing." Alex glanced over to Malnix's longtime bodyguards and commented, "Is it just me, or is he getting grumpier in his old age?" They'd been with Malnix for so long that they were friends as much as subordinates, so they took the liberty of friends to laugh at that joke. Alex had trained them far beyond a pair of typical Clarinian bodyguards. He was very fond of his old friend and joked that he was only keeping Malnix alive until he paid up all the scotch Malnix owed him. But despite all the joking and teasing each other, all 3 of them would be dead before they let anyone get close to Malnix. Alex then got serious and looked at the guards with an unspoken question. One of the guards stated, I didn't see or hear anything until you made the dash. The second replied, I saw you drop down from the ceiling, but it was pure luck. I just happened to be looking at the right spot. Otherwise, I didn't notice a thing. Alex had trained them very well and respected their opinions. He wouldn't want to tangle with them in a real situation. Alex might get the target, but he'd never leave alive. Malnix looked at the three of them. Are you three done congratulating yourselves, or can we finish up the training simulation? Malnix spoke into the microphone. All units, exercise is over. Report to your superiors for after-action report. Oh, probably ought to send someone up to the tower, Alex commented. I left the guard sedated and secured up there. One of the bodyguards opened the door and sent the closest guard to free their comrade. Malnix spoke up. How about we allow these two to participate in an exercise instead of being useless lumps in the background? Alex replied, That defeats the purpose of this training. We're teaching the rookies to protect their bases, and the four of us won't always be there. Malnix sighed. These kids better shape up. These sessions are getting expensive. If you enjoyed this story, please subscribe, like, and comment for part 2. My name is John, and I make these stories for your entertainment.